start winging it. Another Saturday.
Today we're in the west end of Toronto. And who are we going to see today?
Today we're going to go visit Matt Bahen in his studio. Matt is quite an amazing painter, really landscape paintings, and really kind of impasto, really thick. Anyway, we'll talk to him more about his technique. But yeah, we're going to head over to his studio. Should be there soon.
Should be awesome.
Oh wow, look at this. Check out the space.
Wow.
Oh man, so today's the last day of your show at Metivier.
Yeah.
How's that feel? You get to an end of a show.
I don't know. You
Yeah.
guys have had shows before. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's a year and a half of work for, 2 hours
3
one
weeks.
night, and then
Like 3 weeks, you
Yeah.
know, people get to see it, and
Was it the first show since the pandemic began?
of mine.
Yes.
Yeah. So I showed there in 2019 in the fall.
okay, so just
Yeah.
before that would have
So
been the
just
last,
before.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that feel coming out of a pandemic, or we're not out of it yet, but
Well, when we were
coming out of
making
lockdown?
when we were making arrangements to have the show, I wanted to have it like in the fall. I just felt like hopefully like the vaccines will be rolled out
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people will be able to get together
Yeah.
again and that sort of thing, because I wanted to have like an opening and people to be able to come and see the show and so on. So
Yeah, and it was, I mean, the day I went, there were, I don't know if that was the opening day, I guess it was,
Yeah.
there were quite a few people. It wasn't like the old days of,
it's not like the old days. No.
of jam-packed
Yeah.
openings, which I imagine you would have.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I think like for so many of us, like was a big part of our social life, right? Like
Right.
Yeah.
going to the
yeah,
openings
yeah,
and you see all
yeah,
your buddies and
Yeah. Yeah.
get to chat, and now it's sort of a little different.
Yeah.
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 It's like we're kind of creeping or crawling forward, tiptoeing forward out of lockdown, out of this sort of international crisis. But how is it? One of the things we're finding out with some of the artists is how that feels for the artists.
It's just it's
It's not been an
weird.
explosion. It's been more of a
Yeah, and I
taking
mean,
tentative steps.
I know we took it was a PA day last Friday, and we took the kids and the other kids in my daughter's class to jump zone, some trampoline place.
Ah, yeah.
Anyways, it was like full, and everybody's wearing
Yeah,
masks,
yeah,
and they checked
yeah.
for vaccines and stuff like that, and like it did not feel cool.
Yeah.
Like it just
Yeah.
it's like I haven't been around this many people for a long time. Like I'm
Right.
sure that everything's fine, but like I don't know.
People,
There's
everybody's,
comfort
yeah,
level.
everybody
varies.
socially got social anxiety.
Yeah.
Even if they're gregarious and they're not, it's not afraid about meeting people and the social aspect, but
Yeah,
the reality
it's
is,
It's been not a fun time.
yeah, in sort of like a fear-infused time.
How does it feel working through the pandemic? How's it felt so far? Are you? I mean, obviously you get a lot of alone time anyway in the studio, but how does that, with all that's going on around you, now you have to find inspiration to work on? I mean, these are amazing landscapes, amazing pieces, but how does that feel with what's going on? Does it translate into the work, or is this sort of an escape from
It's kind
the outer
of
reality?
like the inspiration just comes from work, right?
Yeah,
So I come every day,
yeah.
and some days are more productive than others, and I can't remember who the author was. He said it's like I get up every morning and I write for like 2 or 3 hours, and at the end of the year I generally have a book. Right?
It's that's right. It's the day after day, putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah,
You get there,
So
yeah.
I think like the inspiration comes from the work, and I know certainly like when the lockdown started to happen and everything like that, I was just so grateful to have a place that I could come and work, and that was really good. I know I've got 2 small children, and we pulled them out of school for the whole time we did the online learning and everything, and my wife was working from home, so like I didn't have I just would work at night after when everyone went to bed. Start with like a pencil drawing,
Yeah.
and then I go over it in dark,
Yeah.
and it's like a little bit like paint by numbers. Like I'll have like,
Oh yeah.
you know, like put a W, and then I'll have like a purple, and then G's, just because it's so detailed that it's easy to get
Right,
lost.
right.
So just basically like a guideline.
So you have an underlying structure you work on. We should have this on camera.
I'm filming now, yeah.
Oh, you are filming?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So you have an underlying structure that you
Yeah, so I have a fairly detailed drawing, and then I do it in dark, just like this,
Wow.
right? And then I work from,
So-
that was the first thing that I did, and then the purple, and then just sort of
Oh, wow.
come forward.
So you
And
work
then-
from the background to the
Yeah, I work
foreground.
from the background to the foreground. And it's sort of like pulling attention away from the focal point.
Mhm.
And that itself is like, creates like a tension that I think like helps make the images vibrate.
Right.
Because
So-
like this kind of like landscape, I mean, just like a generic landscape painting, it can be like a tricky walk to make it interesting, because it can really easily turn into, you know, like Sunday painter
Sure.
type.
Yeah, so
Right.
that actually is a good segue into something I wanted to ask you about. And that was when Mark and I on the way over were like that. In many ways, these are fictive landscapes.
Oh yeah.
In that, you know, people will look at them and think, "Oh, wow, it must have been nice to be there," but you're actually constructing this landscape from many different sources, right?
Yeah, so I'm using multiple sources to construct the landscapes, and I want, and that first initial impression of not recognizing the fissures that happen in the image is what I wanted. Like I didn't
Yeah.
want to have like a didactic type of work. I just wanted it to just be like really organic and let people. The longer you look, the more rewarding the experience is. Hopefully.
Absolutely, yeah. The other sort of tension in your work is that from a distance, they could look photographic in the
Right.
sense that, you know, they're recognizable and the
Very-
eye
like it's very
plays
tight.
the eye
Yeah.
plays the trick that, but then you get close and they are so textured and the paint is impasto and it's
It really just like falls into like just like a series of marks.
exactly, and the
dots
closer
and
you
gloss
get,
and-
the more you see that it's actually physical.
Mm-hmm. And so I think again, the application of the paint itself is really intentional, in the sense that I want people, like, even though I'm making a representational image of a recognizable thing, I want the paint to be really heavy, because paintings are read differently than photographs. So photographs have the idea of journalistic truth, and paintings are constructions.
Well, and
Right?
there's so
and,
yeah.
and historically we're read as like allegorical, right? When you would have like the still lifes, you know, the fruit would be meant the passage of time. When you'd see water, it means baptism, and then
Right.
wood would be the crucifixion, and so on. And so like having the paint so heavy is really signaling to the viewer that like this is a painting, it's supposed to be read like a painting.
Right.
And you know, it needs to be seen in person, right? I mean, again,
I mean, that's the other. My work does not, much like myself, doesn't photograph well.
well, then, you know, on photographs they look, oh, that's a nice landscape, you
Right.
know? But you get up close to them, and it's like the. Well, I've been using the word sumptuous to describe them. Like, you know, oil paint is so sumptuous, so sensual, so visceral.
Yeah, that's how I would describe it. It's like visceral.
I first know your work from Le Gallery,
Mm-hmm.
and the work back then was different in that it seemed to have elements of architecture, especially kind of the fading factories, and then there was this element of dogs or wolves, or so it was this interesting allegory. I'm assuming they were
Right, yeah.
allegorical about industrial. The industrial chimes are really in decay, and the wilding element is taking over.
Yeah, the way that I thought about those works was the taking like the beautiful ruin, and really what those works are about is like this incredible light that's coming in, and the dogs I always thought as like a Virgil type character, where the meaning of the painting like oscillates on like how one's perception of the dogs is whether it be friendly or
Right. Whether
Not
they're like fighting or fucking or
Yeah.
eating garbage. I think in one of them.
Yeah, that was one of my go-to moves. Classic dogs eating garbage. They flew off the walls.
They're scrambling to buy them. Were they?
And then so then from the architectural works where I wanted to subvert the imagery somewhat, where like really like make it about this light and growth and so on. And then I would take like the landscapes and I still do that today, where the horizon line is just like pushed so far up.
Right.
When you think about, when you look at like a landscape painting, you think or whatever, your typical group of 7, you have like your lake, you have like your rocks and trees, and then you have like your sun.
It's like you're standing there, and the horizon line
so it's like
is based on
made into 3, right? So I just like
layer
just
cake.
pushed it all up, and then it's very much like you're almost like falling into
The
land.
Yeah, and I guess in the ones I'm thinking of, there was a bit of a romantic glory, like romantic painting, the great paintings of the 1800s with the landscapes that were, grand and.
Well, that was about, again, like those ones were about the sublime, right?
The sublime. Okay, right, exactly, the sublime. So is this the current piece you're working on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can
So I have an exhibition coming up the end of the spring at the Glenhurst Museum out in Brantford.
Okay.
So I get to like work on that.
Right.
And then show Peter Robertson out in Edmonton in the fall.
Okay.
October or November.
Right.
So again, like some of my shows just finishing today, and it's really nice to have something else to be working towards.
I always find having a show motivates you.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're probably always going to be painting, but if it's like 2 years down the road, I got time, I can fart around, I can play around. But...
Well, sometimes that's good, like to really experiment and that type of thing. I find like with my own practice, I just come in and just work.
You do?
Yeah. I used to, earlier on, used to really like want to have like a painting that was wet when you put the show up or whatever. It's like conception that's like, it shows that you're working really hard. Like really what it shows is that you don't know how to manage your time.
Is that Francis Bacon's approach? He'd wait till like a week before the show and he'd paint them all in that final week.
I think that like there's diminishing returns with that approach, unless you're a genius. And,
well,
I've never been accused.
Yeah,
of
that, so. He worked in very thin paint and just a few swipes, and that was okay. You could do that. It worked for him.
If you make a mistake with painting of this thickness using oils, how do you rectify it?
Well, it depends what kind of
mistake. Take a while, right?
It depends what kind of mistake it is. Like this painting is actually really forgiving. It's just like
you just add more on, right?
put it on top. if my composition is wrong,
Mhm.
then I'm,
Yeah.
sewered.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you don't really like. I look at the drawing, and I'm like, all right, yeah, this is gonna work. And then I get to the end, and like, this did not work at all, and I can't fix it.
And it can't be. So you've had some of those where
That-
you
yeah.
have to tear it off the stretcher and throw it out, or
Yeah,
it's not salvageable.
it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
So
So yeah, like
yeah.
little things, like I can. It's easy to move.
Yeah,
around,
little
so.
things, of course.
So in this painting, we can see how you're working from the top down, where it's thicker, and then you get down to this unfinished part, and then
Yeah,
down
it's
here
not
it's still a bit thin. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's going to get more layers.
Yeah, so I work from I'll have like a mid-tone, and then I'll work dark, and then
Okay.
I'll go
Okay, right.
Like-
you lay down the mid-tone, and then you do
Yeah.
yeah.
sort of
Kind
just to
like-
get a sense compositionally, like if
Sure.
everything's
Okay.
working.
Yeah. So like that sort of tan color down there, that's just sort of like the mid-tone.
That's
and
the
then
mid-tone, yeah.
And you'll build up
Exactly.
darker and lighter from
And
there.
the same with like the water, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I'll add more
Sure.
complexity
There'll be
to
some
it.
shadows and some,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
there'll be some light. So in between the dogs and the sort of the sublime theme, I noticed there was a group of paintings that had lots of horses, or these sort of river valleys.
Yeah, so what I did there was I was interested. I've always been interested in using literature, and so for a long time I was using like Cormac McCarthy's writing, just because the stories just like are interesting, but like how the guy composes sentences is just absolutely mind-boggling. Particularly like Blood Meridian, and then another one called The Crossing, which is in the 90s.
Sure.
And so like so that's where like you're looking at the form over function or whatever, where just like how he's writing is just actually what I'm much more interested in than
The content or the story.
content,
Yeah.
right. And so thinking about that led me to start thinking about like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and just how the structure of the story like influences the meaning of it. So that exhibition was very much like condensing the hero's journey. So like I had like those big river valley paintings, which is like where you start from, and then the tree line paintings were very much like crossing the threshold, and then you have the horses and the struggle and everything like that, and then I had the barbed wire paintings.
Yeah. I was going to mention that there's the barbed wire, which seems to be about it harkens back to that, like the industrial stuff where there's still a presence of humans, but this is like barbed wire is basically keeping you out or keeping something in.
Keeping something in, yeah. And then that was the same time when all of like the refugee stuff at the border was going on.
Oh yeah, right. So there's that whole element.
Yeah. So I mean, so you're pulling from a bunch of different sources, and as I got older, just trusting myself more.
So the interesting thing is, because there are like the kind of abstract or the landscape painters, and they're just painting. They're interested in painting the landscape, the beauty of the landscape, which is undeniable. But sounds like there's a lot more going on. Whether it's not explicit, but it's buried in the layers of your meaning in the paintings.
Yeah, so I'm using like landscape much more as like a vehicle, right, than the destination.
Yeah. Pan around some of these. And so the other very noticeable theme in your paintings is fire.
Right.
I wonder if you can
Yeah.
talk about, I mean,
I
other,
remember being a student, and I was doing these like WTO protest paintings.
right,
That's when like like the Seattle
yes,
thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I went to Quebec City, and so I was like very like involved with that. And it's like there's an image of somebody jumping over like a tire fire. So I like tried to paint it, and it just did not work out. And then I did a series of watercolors, 2006, 7. And so like watercolor, like the fire worked out like nicely.
yes, yeah.
And then so it's just something that like I've always wanted to. I think it's just such a powerful elemental thing. Right?
Absolutely.
It just like
It's-
cuts
it's-
right
yeah,
to the
yeah,
core
yeah,
of the
yeah.
human experience. It's just the same way that certain melodies just like vibrate forever.
Sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, absolutely. Like the fire, and then it's interesting because in this one, the fire is actually in the sky. It's really sunset or
Well,
sun.
so I wanted to change from to move it from the fire being the subject, but rather it being this hum in the background. So that now that the work is dealing with.
Oh, so this is actually, I'm seeing it now. That's a fire, like in the distance.
Yeah.
And that's the smoke and the. I was just sort of seeing it more as
It
a.
did look like the sky initially, but I did
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it
Well, I was
just
thinking
in
about
landscape.
sunset, but it's actual literal fire.
That's right.
Yeah.
But even though you've moved it to the background, the color and the lighting, it still stands out.
Right.
It's still very striking. It still stands out to the viewer. And the way I'm not sure if it's intended, but it seems to be a reflection of the light down below as well.
That's just like for it to balance.
Yeah, yeah. But so even though it's moved to the background, it's a key element in that work.
There was a couple of paintings in the show that had that as well, where I pushed it back, or wanted to be a little bit more subtle than
Sure.
rather than it being the subject.
And then you brought water in.
Oh, that's a waterfall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waterfall and then a. sort
And
of
then I've noticed this flower appears in a few.
yeah, like it will in there as
the-
well.
Well, the flowers are composites as well. Some drawings.
So are they an invented flower?
It's kind of. I mean, like I'm using like real flowers. I'm just
Okay,
pushing them
okay, but
together.
you are.
Yeah, there's the. That's what my wife describes this as the original Photoshop.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like
Yeah.
do 3 or 4 different types of plants and then draw it together
Sure.
and figure out how it works.
And so in this one, one could really tell a story, like almost like a mythological, 2 souls that died were reborn as like there's a
Yeah,
real
I-
feeling. There's a real feeling of mythology to it.
The flowers,
narrative element.
the idea behind them, or the inspiration from them, it came from the Hiro Miyazaki, the Studio Ghibli guys, right? They did
Yeah. The
Princess
anime,
Mononoke and
Yep.
Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind in particular, made me really think. It's like, oh, we'll just use that. And I mean, again, like it's a more pop culture, and it's also like an Eastern influence. I believe it's like Shinto is the
Like,
faith that they follow, which is like more of like a nature worship.
right, yeah, it's sort of
Right,
like
we're like
the
every
Japanese shamanism.
Yeah, it's like where like every tree
Yeah,
has spirit
paganism,
and that
yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah.
See, for me, coloristically, is that such a word? Coloristically.
Color-wise.
Color-wise, the flower has taken the place of the fire,
Oh yeah,
and
right.
the water has been replaced. The fire has been replaced by water,
Well, when I
but the
After-
fire has been replaced, or is
after I did the water
embedded
paintings,
in the
or
flowers.
sorry, after I did the fire paintings, or like I figured out how to paint it.
Yeah.
Then I wanted to like, it's like, oh, I think what works in it is the sense of movement, or like the alive nature of it. So then I started doing like waterfall paintings to try to do the same type of thing, right? You just sort of flip it.
Crazy about
Well, it's the same
waterfalls.
kind of elemental power that fire has.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of power.
Yeah,
But yeah.
but it's a force.
the way
Well, we
that-
just saw
the
what
way
happened
that-
in BC, right?
the way
Yeah.
that fire draws everything upwards and the water plunges, but
Yeah.
either way, they're both powerful forces.
So it seems to me that like painting is a full-time thing for you now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I worked as a social worker. I did street outreach with the homeless
Okay.
for 10 years, and got really heavy. And then when my daughter was born, I decided to go full
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's like that's what logical decision. It's like, oh, we're gonna have a child. Better quit my job.
I'm gonna be a professional artist.
And it worked out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So-
Yeah, that's awesome. And your works have obviously landscape in and of itself will have an appeal, but and you could have done like as you said a group of 7 knockoffs that people would buy, but you're really raising it to a level. So I've noticed that many of your works are square format. Is there a
Yeah, again, that's just another compositional element that I can manipulate to create tension,
okay? Yeah,
right? So I'm like always thinking of creating
yeah,
tension
yeah, and that
because that's what makes things
that sort
interesting.
of squared framework kind of helps you to create that. Because absolutely, once this one's a little, is it? Oh,
It's a little
square?
bit. It's a little
Little
off.
bit wider, so you automatically read it as landscape.
Mhm.
You put it vertical, you automatically read it as
Portrait.
portrait or a
exactly.
body.
And here it's this way you kind of get both.
Square has a certain,
Defies the
interesting.
pure landscape vista approach.
Yeah. So that's so you're compressing it. So like you're making something that wants to do one thing, and you're putting
And
it
it
in.
gives it a different energy.
And it gives exactly. Right?
That's
it
true,
just
like,
makes
when you think
just
about
puts
it-
that tension into it.
Your natural inclination is that you want it to be like landscape format. Because I'm just looking at this and going, oh, what's over there? You want to see what's.
Where it continues. Yeah,
It's
of
interesting.
course. In a sense, it's cropping. It's like a cropped
You've cropped, yeah.
landscape, in a sense. But it does give it a different kind of energy. It gives it more focus in many respects, too. Like, again, imagine this waterfall here. If this was a wider canvas, it would have a very different feel.
Or if I
Well,
flipped
yeah.
Right?
If it
or if I
was-
made it like the vertical,
Sure,
so like
yeah,
really.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which would work if you wanted that to
Yeah.
be the focus, yeah.
sure.
Also makes it easier to package them all together and transport them, doesn't it?
And it just makes them more Instagrammable.
Oh, geez, yeah. Well,
yeah. No, you show that's up now. I notice that you don't frame your works or anything, but do you find if people buy them, they get them framed or?
some people get them framed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like you get like like a shadow frame.
Yes,
or the
yes,
little drop.
okay, yeah.
So then you can really get like
You can put, yeah,
the edges.
yeah. That's good, yeah,
I want
because
to come
you,
back just to the square versus rectangle
Yeah.
landscape approach. This one is more in landscape,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
it feels to me like it has to be in landscape.
with the
width of
with the
waves
with the murmuration.
Mm-hmm.
just it would be such a different painting if it was just a square. You just need that breadth.
Well, you got the waves, and then you've got the murmuration of.
Yeah.
Were they so starlings that do the murmuration? Or-
Yeah.
Yeah, starlings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's from a few years ago. That one.
So this one, also, I would say it has some theme of sublime, a different kind of.
Thing is sublime, and also
Yeah.
like I love Richard Serra's drawings,
Mm.
and so I think like with the murmurations, I was able to just like use shape
Right.
you know, as well, just like as a formal,
It gives it an abstract element.
and it's got this like beautiful and yet ominous quality at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's murmuration is quite a fascinating phenomenon in of itself. That it's kind of like nature's drawing, and
Yeah, it's incredible to watch.
to see those shapes kind of gather and transform and change, and knowing that there's a group consciousness
Yeah,
that's going on.
they call it. I can't recall the term for it.
Mm.
But yeah, I've got a square one of murmurations as well. Want to hold this?
Sure.
Yeah, I can. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, I like the
So you can see, like, just like it's got a different vibe, eh?
yeah,
With the
and
square?
the more, and then the color is, you know, dawn or
Oh yeah,
or,
it's a completely different vibe.
in the murmuration.
But here the waves have a little bit more verticality to it, which
Yeah, it's
is
more
why
actually
it's,
crashing.
and they're
it's more
crashing.
violent.
yeah, it makes more sense for the square. I don't know, that's amazing.
It's sort of like, I don't know if you like comparisons, like a Patterson Ewan doing a Turner painting.
Right.
Just to mash up two painters, you know, of
Yeah,
impossible,
the
you know.
texture. And
Yeah,
the,
yeah. And then the again, you know, Turner was very at painting the sublime.
Yeah,
These are awesome.
and the forces of nature.
Yeah.
Both of them were into the forces of nature.
Yeah, that's what the Patterson really found his
Oh,
way once he did. He was like, I'm going to make the world's biggest woodcut.
Yeah.
absolutely. Here's a. I'm just noticing there's a horse painting here.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's those.
See, I didn't realize. I was looking at it only part.
Well,
the
when you
top part,
first
and I thought
glance,
it
you
was
think
just
they're rocks,
stones
and then it's like I looked at it closely, and it's like,
Wow.
oh, look at those horses.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
God, you just feel for those horses. The strain.
The struggle.
The strain and the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, something, but this one here in particular has a certain, like, I don't know, forlorn kind of like.
The pathos. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to look at which one. Here's some horses.
That one's got a horse too, isn't it? Yeah.
Again, there the struggle isn't
Oh,
quite
wow.
as
Yeah.
difficult. It doesn't look as difficult.
I like the perspective. What's the word? Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
perspective.
the higher
It's
perspective.
like you're standing up on a rock or something,
Yeah.
looking down on them. You really get that. You really feel like I almost get vertigo from looking at them.
You primarily grabbing the elements of your imagery from the internet, or do you pick up things when you travel?
It's both. So like I do take like a lot of stuff off online
Yeah.
and then crop it. Friends will send me work. So like the one over here, that top part is southeastern Saskatchewan. A friend of mine, she spent the summer there, and you know I've been there before as well. So she made amazing photographs. So like they come from like all different places.
Yeah.
Although like I will usually, I almost exclusively just take use imagery that like I'm familiar with. So places that I've been. That's like more of like my like home type place. Like, so there's no like tropical locales.
Right. I'm saying it's
right.
very northern.
But do you take eco holidays like that kind of thing, and then just whip out the phone?
I did a.
Because I do.
I did a research trip to Detroit when I was doing the abandoned buildings and everything.
Yeah.
But no, with family and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Just we
yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
What I
3
mean
weeks
is
in a
that-
canoe in my
Not
backpack.
so much that, but just going to a beautiful locale.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the family,
Yeah.
and just I don't know.
I knew I do like
Things
like
like
when
that.
I like now that you do the phone in your camera that
Just go on a day hike with the kids and
yeah like I do
photos on the
like I
way.
do snap like as we go or like I see something
Yeah.
like interesting and I try to grab it right off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, oh, I can't just take a photo. I have to actually get the right composition. This is going in a painting.
That's
It's
right.
gotta look just.
Well, I mean, for myself, like I much prefer amateur photography
Sure.
to take
Oh yeah.
to use, right? Because it's not perfect.
That's right. Otherwise, it's already composed.
Yeah, there's nothing to.
You can play with the composition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, Matt, it's been great talking with
thanks
you,
so much for
and
coming over and appreciate
yeah, all
Thank
the
you so
best,
much.
and